She thought she was marrying the man of her dreams. But behind James Rowley's charming smile was a deadly secret, and Olivia Dean would soon find herself locked in a nightmare of control, lies and a twisted history buried across 2 countries. What began as a fairy tale in America unraveled into a cross-continental hunt for truth, terror, and survival. Olivia Dean had never believed in whirlwind love. She was the kind of woman who triple-checked emails before hitting send, who planned vacations 6 months in advance, who didn't let feelings cloud judgment, but something about James Rowley swept past all her defenses like a silent storm. He wasn't just charming, he was articulate, funny, and seemed to know exactly what to say to make her feel seen. Their first messages on the networking site were innocent enough. Comments on a shared marketing article. A few jokes about American versus British work culture. But within a week, their chats were lasting hours into the night. Olivia told herself it was harmless. Just talking. Just words. But deep inside, a strange flutter had taken root, equal parts excitement and fear. It had been years since anyone had made her feel special. Her last relationship had ended coldly, with months of silence and growing distance. James, on the other hand, made her laugh until she cried. He told her about growing up in a quiet corner of England, how he lost his parents young, how he worked his way up in tech. He listened when she spoke about her late-night anxiety and her mother's illness. He remembered the smallest things. Her favorite coffee, her dream of writing a book one day, the shade of blue she wore most. Olivia's heart started to trust him before her mind caught up. The gifts came next. Not loud or flashy, thoughtful. A limited edition book she'd mentioned once. A silk scarf in her favorite color. Flowers that arrived at her office with handwritten notes that made her blush. Her coworkers teased her, but Olivia smiled through it. No one had ever made such effort before. When James finally booked a flight to New Jersey to visit, she stood at the airport feeling both like a teenager and a fool. But the moment she saw him walking out of those sliding doors, tall, sharply dressed, warm eyes, her doubts faded into the airport noise. The proposal came on the 3rd day, during a walk in a quiet park. She didn't expect it. Her hands trembled, and for a moment she froze. She thought of her mother, who would say it was too fast. Her father, who always told her to think twice. Her friends, who barely knew his name. But in that moment, James knelt with such conviction, such confidence, and looked at her as if she was the only person on earth who mattered. And for a fleeting second, Olivia felt chosen, truly chosen. Later that night, alone in bed, a small ache tugged at her chest. Was this real? Was she rushing? But then she remembered his eyes, his voice, the way he held her hand with both of his like she was fragile glass. She told herself this was love, that not all good things take time, that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of the life she'd been waiting for. A life that soon enough would begin to crumble from the inside out. But for now, she was still dreaming, and the dream was beautiful. The house didn't feel like hers anymore. Olivia would wake each morning to the soft hum of security cameras mounted in corners of every room, once her safe space, now a place where every move felt monitored. At first, James told her it was for their safety. He had insisted that the world was dangerous, that married couples needed to protect themselves from break-ins, from threats, from outsiders who envy happiness. She believed him. She wanted to believe him. But the locks on the inside of the bedroom door, the sudden change in her phone passcode, and the way her laptop now required his fingerprint to unlock, these were things no alarm system could justify. She tried to ignore the sinking feeling in her gut. Each time she questioned him, James had a smooth answer, the kind that made her doubt her own instincts. "I'm protecting us," he'd say. "This is how I show love." And it worked, at first. Olivia had always been a fixer, someone who assumed people had reasons for the way they behaved. But the quiet fear creeping into her chest told her this wasn't love. It was possession. Her friends started noticing. Emma called less frequently now, after Olivia canceled lunch 3 times in a row. Jason, her coworker and close friend, sent a message asking if she was okay after her social media went completely silent. But Olivia didn't reply. She couldn't. James had changed all her passwords under the excuse of digital security. He said too many scams targeted women like her. When she asked for access, he laughed gently, then brushed her hair behind her ear and whispered, "I'll take care of everything. Just relax." That moment lingered in her memory, because despite the gentleness of his voice, something in his eyes was cold, like he wasn't really seeing her. Just something he owned. Soon, he convinced her to quit her job. He said they didn't need the extra income, that she could rest now, write that book she always talked about. The truth was she couldn't reply to emails without him watching. Every word she typed felt rehearsed. Every phone call filtered through his ears. Her world was shrinking, and she was losing the ability to name what was happening to her. Then came the bruises, small at first. A grabbed wrist, a push into a doorframe. She told herself it was an accident. That stress made people act strangely. But one morning, she caught her reflection in the mirror, her left eye slightly swollen, her lip cracked at the corner. She didn't recognize herself. She told the neighbors it was a kitchen accident. Even she wanted to believe that. When her best friend arrived unannounced, knocking with a birthday card and homemade cookies, Olivia watched from behind the curtains, paralyzed. James told her not to open the door. She didn't. And as her friend's voice faded down the driveway, something inside Olivia withered. Not because she had been forgotten, but because she had become someone else entirely, someone who no longer knew how to ask for help. While Olivia was unraveling piece by piece in her New Jersey home, a different story had already been written across the ocean, a story she had no idea she was now a part of. James Rowley wasn't his real name, not even close. In London he had once been known as Michael Hayward, a man whose charming smile had disarmed more than one woman, and whose lies had destroyed more than just hearts. 2 women had married him in the past 10 years. Both had disappeared. Both were never found. His trail was clever, designed to mislead. Each time he vanished from the UK, he left behind just enough traces to suggest the women had run away on their own. A train ticket here, a handwritten note there. The police had tried briefly, but without bodies, without hard evidence, their cases went cold. And Michael, now James, knew exactly how to slip into another life. America had been his next reset. Olivia, his new project. It was Olivia's sister, Rachel, who began to question things that didn't add up. Olivia had stopped calling. Her voice sounded hollow the last time they spoke, like she was reading from a script. Then came the cancelled family visits, the stilted texts, filled with unfamiliar phrases and cold formality. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deeper than a bad marriage. Rachel hired a private investigator, an ex-cop from Philadelphia with a sharp eye and a bitter taste for men who hurt women. The investigator started pulling threads. James Rowley didn't exist before 2017. His social security number traced back to someone deceased. His employment history was spotless, but fake. No one at the companies he listed had ever heard of him. The deeper they looked, the darker it got. Immigration records connected James to a man with a slightly different name and a cancelled UK passport. British news archives, barely visible online, mentioned 2 women, Isabel Hart and Diane Maxwell. Both vanished within a year of marrying Michael Hayward. Both had left behind accounts drained of money, homes sold quickly, and life insurance policies newly signed. The details were hauntingly familiar. Olivia had no idea she was following the same path. The investigator compiled a report and sent it to Rachel. She read it all in one breathless night, her hands shaking, the words burning into her skin. Her sister was married to a ghost with a dangerous history. Panic set in. But the fear wasn't just for what James had done, it was for what he might still do. Every moment counted. Rachel tried to call Olivia, but her number was disconnected. Emails bounced back. She drove to the house, but no one answered the door. The lights were on, but the world inside was locked tight. sealed from interference. She left the report in the mailbox, hoping Olivia would find it, praying she would see the truth. Somewhere inside, Olivia was already starting to doubt the man she had once believed was her forever. But knowing the truth and surviving it were two different things, and time, once again, was running out. The night Olivia tried to escape, the wind howled like a warning. Rain tapped against the windows in steady rhythm, a soft and steady beat that echoed her thudding heart. She waited until James fell asleep, his breathing deep, almost unnaturally calm. Her bare feet crept across the wooden floor like they were learning to walk again. She didn't dare turn on the lights. The cameras would catch her. She moved like a shadow, driven not by courage but by desperation. She reached his office and slowly turned the doorknob, locked. She had expected that. But a week ago, she had stolen a key, just in case. Her hands trembled as she slid it in. The click was deafening in the silence. She paused, waiting to hear his voice. Nothing. Her breath returned. Inside, the room was cold. Too cold. A steel cabinet sat in the corner, the kind you see in crime shows, unassuming, gray, unmarked. Olivia opened it and felt her knees weaken. Inside were files, photos, ID cards, names and faces she didn't recognize. But two women stood out, one in a white wedding dress, smiling. The other, pale and gaunt, lying in what looked like a hospital bed. Neither woman was her, but both had the same haunted expression Olivia saw in her own reflection now. Behind a stack of papers, she found a folder marked with her name, birth certificate, marriage license, a will she never signed, a life insurance policy in James' name, listing her as the insured. Her throat tightened. She hadn't signed it, but there it was, with her signature copied, forged, perfect. She wanted to scream, but the sound stayed trapped inside her. Something snapped in her chest. She realized then that he hadn't just taken over her life, he had prepared for her death. The next day, it was a child who saw it. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, chasing a soccer ball through the backyard fence. His eyes caught something strange in the small basement window: chains, scattered clothes, a flickering light bulb swinging above a chair. He told his parents. They called the police. When the officers arrived with a warrant, Olivia sat on the couch, staring blankly at the floor. James stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, calm as ever. But as soon as the officers mentioned the basement, his posture shifted, his charm cracked, his words turned sharp. Olivia said nothing. She didn't need to. The hidden room was behind a fake wall built with precision. Inside they found the chair, restraints, torn women's clothing, a camera, and scorched pages of a diary. The air smelled like damp wood and something worse. Olivia stood outside the door as officers moved past her. She was asked if she knew what was in there. She nodded once, barely. She wasn't rescued in a blaze of heroism. She wasn't screaming or crying. She was quiet, too quiet. A woman who had survived by disappearing into herself and now stood at the edge of remembering who she used to be. The courtroom was cold, not just in temperature but in spirit. Olivia sat in the witness stand, hands folded tightly in her lap, her body still carrying the echoes of a prison she'd only recently escaped. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken since the night the basement was discovered. The trauma had sealed her voice like a vault, but her silence held weight. Every time her eyes flicked toward James, sitting just feet away in a dark suit, the room seemed to tighten with invisible threads of tension. He looked composed, even pleasant. A man wrongfully accused, if one only looked skin deep. But behind that polished demeanor was a monster. Olivia knew it. So did the prosecutor, who unfolded the case like a slow-burning fire. Piece by piece, the jury heard about forged identities, vanished wives, life insurance policies written in bloodless ink. Each fact was sharper than the last. The evidence spoke for her. The forged documents bearing her signature. The surveillance footage of James locking the basement door at night. The forensic reconstruction of her diary, the one she'd hidden in a hollow floorboard, burned in pieces but still legible in fragments. Her words once scribbled in fear were now being read aloud to strangers, their weight crashing against courtroom walls like waves. "I don't know how many days it's been. I'm not allowed to leave. I think he's drugging my food. My hands shake all the time. I don't feel real anymore. I think I'm next." Gasps filled the gallery. James didn't flinch. His face was a mask, rehearsed and empty. Across the ocean, in a courthouse in London, another storm was brewing. UK authorities had reopened the missing persons cases of Isabel Hart and Diane Maxwell. With James's real identity confirmed, the threads began to tie themselves. Old evidence re-examined. A remote cottage found in Kent with traces of female DNA in the soil outside. Shallow graves never marked. Teeth and bone fragments slowly matching records long buried in archives. Olivia had never met these women, yet their stories now lived in hers. There was talk of extradition. The media swarmed both sides of the Atlantic, dubbing the case the transatlantic predator trial. Reporters speculated, twisted facts, invented motives. But inside Olivia, no headlines mattered. What mattered was surviving. Not just James, but the shadow he had left inside her. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, aggravated assault, identity fraud, and attempted murder. Life imprisonment without parole. Olivia didn't react. She simply sat still, hands folded, eyes staring into the space where James once sat. He was gone now. But the stain remained. She was offered the chance to speak. A victim impact statement. But she shook her head. Her silence was her story. A silence born from control, but reclaimed now in power. She had no more words for him, only the memory of escape, and the knowledge that for once she was no longer being watched. The name Olivia Dean no longer existed. The woman who once lived under that name had died quietly the moment the rockroom doors closed behind her. In her place was someone else. A person with a new identity, a new city, a new life constructed carefully by the government's witness protection program. But reinvention doesn't erase trauma. It only hides it beneath layers of paperwork and changed lock. She lived now in a small, gray apartment in the Pacific Northwest, where the rain blurred the windows and the days passed quietly. Most of her neighbors didn't know her name. She liked it that way. She woke early, made coffee she never finished, and stared out at the dripping trees, wondering how long it would take to feel real again, or if she ever would. Each night she locked the doors twice, and checked the closet before bed. She didn't tell anyone why. The past wasn't welcome here, but it followed her like a scent that wouldn't wash off. Sometimes she caught herself listening for footsteps, his footsteps, even though she knew James was in a maximum security prison thousands of miles away. Still, fear has a long memory. Longer than justice. She wrote, sometimes, pages she didn't save, stories that mirrored her own but with different endings. She gave the women in her stories strength she hadn't known she possessed. She imagined lives where they fought back earlier, screamed louder, ran faster. She didn't cry anymore. It was like her tears had run dry during the trial, used up by the weight of survival. Then came the news from the UK. Authorities had unearthed 2 sets of remains near a secluded cottage James once rented outside of Kent. The DNA confirmed what many already feared. One of them was Isabel Hart, the first wife. The other was still unidentified. It didn't shock Olivia. She had always known he had killed before. She had felt it in his silence, in his touch, in the way he looked at her not as a person, but as a thing, something to be bent, used, and erased. Reporters tried to find her, to ask for interviews, to offer book deals and documentaries. She declined them all. Her story was no longer a performance. It was a wound she lived with, not something to be sold. She didn't want to be a survivor on camera. She just wanted to be forgotten. But part of her knew she never would be. People still whispered her name in true crime forums, still picked apart her story for clues or drama. Her face, though blurred, had become a symbol of endurance. And that, in its own strange way, gave her a flicker of strength. She sat on her small balcony one afternoon, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun filter through the clouds. For the first time in what felt like years, she breathed deeply and let herself feel the air without flinching. He was gone. She was alive, and maybe, just maybe, she was finally free.